Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright. What's in your closet?
Today we're talking about minute 75, which begins with Tony preparing his suit and ends with Natasha pulling herself free just in the nick of time. Back on the show, we have Kurtis Findlay from the Epic Marvel Podcast. Hello, Kurtis.
Hello, hello. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. And I almost said welcome because I thought this was my podcast. I'm used to welcoming my own guests. No, I am happy to be here again on this show talking about yet another minute of Avengers. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely.
I have an opening question. May I have the floor?
Please.
This is an opening question for Kurtis. Do you have a favorite weird place where Tony has built a bespoke cavern for his suit that he brings with him across comic, film, whatever? Do you have a favorite? Because this always feels just like peak Tony. Like, I know S.H.I.E.L.D. has its own helicarrier. I'm going to go ahead and take some space and build my suit into it.
Well, yeah, Tony does have a history of that for sure. I don't know if I have a favorite or an odd one. In the old days, he just always kept it in his briefcase.
Yeah.
It was like a very thin, pliable metal, and he would fold it up like clothing and keep it in his briefcase.
Those were the days. Those were the days.
Yeah.
I think the briefcase suit is still one of my favorites of the early era, right? The Iron Man 2. When we get to see it on the track, I think it's one of my very favorite interpretations of this portable suit. But as we get into, I'm one of those people who still delights in the suit that emerges around him, whether it's all separate pieces flying onto his body that we see later here, or the nano suit. I think is really fun. I might be an island on that for purists, but I think it's really fun. This just always delights me. This hero like top spotlight on like just how cool everybody thinks his suit should be.
They had to figure that out pretty quick in the movies, because in the comics, you can have one panel where he's Tony Stark, and then the very next panel, he's suited up and ready to go. But when you have, the actual passage of time through film like this, it takes a long time to put on a suit of armor. So, yeah, the nanotech coming around him was a necessity for when he's like, falling through the air, or he needs to get that on in an instant. And so they figured that out pretty quick. So yeah, it's interesting to see these the first few movies where he does have his armor in a closet. He needs to put it on, or the briefcase thing or whatever. It's still a little clunky.
Well, even in this film earlier, when we first see him arriving at Stark Tower, we see him having it removed with that fantastic, as they called it, the car wash, and the whole robotic thing that he had built in the ramp to just slowly take it off piece by piece. And it's a delight to think that he spends so much time thinking about specifically how to get the suit on and off. Like, that is something that he really spends a lot of time dwelling over. And, it does make me wonder, like, we get a great reveal, of course, of the Mark VI suit here in this beautifully illuminated storage closet that he has here. But it does make me wonder, like, is there also a very handy way that he uses to kind of put it on and off here, as opposed to just kind of like putting it on piece by piece? Obviously for the sake of an action sequence, we don't want to spend the time doing that. We just want to jump into the point where when we see him next, he's in it.
Yeah, he's in it. Yeah. One panel he's not, next panel he is. There we go.
Exactly. There it is right there.
In an alternate timeline, there is a battle where the portion of the helicarrier has been destroyed and has cut power to this little room, and he cannot access his armor.
Oh, I love it.
Tony is totally useless in this entire segment.
And then he spends the entire time just trying to figure out, how do I get into this
wrenching
thing?
The door open. Yeah. Hand me that crowbar.
I also just want to point out, he is actually the second person on this particular ship, on the helicarrier, to have their own personal illuminated suit storage area, since we did see earlier that Steve did have a little space for his suit as well. So it is interesting. And I feel like part of it is Coulson, obviously, in his fandom, wanting to build it that way. But I think part of it, like, especially as Tony's concerned, obviously Coulson wasn't involved in that. But I think that these are people who genuinely think that is a damn cool suit. And I want to make sure it's lit beautifully so that when people see it, when I open this for somebody else, it's not for me, it's for somebody else. I'm sure that's what they think.
I'm sure that's it, because what we didn't see, I'm sure it's in a deleted scene we haven't seen, is that actually Captain America's suit cove is actually Coulson's Captain America fan cove, and it's in his quarters. Like, Steve has to go to Coulson's room to get his own suit. I'm sure that's what it is.
It reminds me of like the NBA locker room when the press goes in and everybody's jerseys are hanging right there with their number facing.
Yeah, exactly. It's good for the cameras.
Yep,
that's right.
All right, the Mark 6. I just quick thoughts on this, because as Tony is walking in, he pulls out his phone and he taps his phone to, I guess, power his suit up. And I guess I just wanted to check, because I'm trying to remember, Kyle and Rob were doing the season 3 with Iron Man 2. Is his suit at this point self-powering and no longer powered up by his arc reactor in his chest?
I believe so.
I mean, I'm assuming so, because it powers itself up right here.
Yeah.
I was just trying to remember if we had actually seen this happen before.
Well, I would imagine there's some sort of auxiliary power in the suit itself, but when you have to like actually use your repulsor rays and stuff like that, you would need the arc reactor. Because he still has the arc reactor in his chest. He doesn't get rid of that until Iron Man 3, right?
Right. He goes through the surgery to deal with all that. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. I was just thinking about that. I'm like, because he's powering it up. But yeah, maybe it's just the power that it needs to do what it needs to do to
bring the systems online.
Yeah, right. Wake Jarvis up.
That little device that he's holding in at the beginning of this clip, the very first time I watched this minute for this podcast, I was like, what does it say on there? And I thought it said Coldplay, but it actually says deploy. I thought this was his iPod. He's like, let's get some music going here.
He only works to Coldplay. Just to crank up a little fix you right here for the moment.
I think it's more appropriate, the scientist.
True. Okay.
Got to get, I mean, he is somebody who we've seen, even in this film, he certainly likes having his tunes ready as he's doing his work. So, very funny. The bulk of this minute, we go from Tony and kind of waking his suit up, we'll say. The bulk of this minute, though, we're going to be talking about this. We are in the lower equipment room where Natasha and Bruce they'd been blown through the window when there was the explosion that hit them in the Wishbone lab, knocking them out and down to a lower level. And this is kind of where we spend the rest of this minute, as Natasha is trying to figure out this situation where she is pinned. She's got her ankle pinned under this pipe that fell, and Bruce is starting to hulk out. He's going a little crazy, breathing heavily. When he does finally turn to her, we are starting to see green splotches showing up on his skin. And so we're really getting this place of kind of sorting out this whole thing between these two, and particularly like how to handle Bruce, especially for Natasha, who we know she is human. She is somebody who could really get hurt from this big guy.
Well, I really like this transformation. I love Hulk transformations. Let me tell you, every time it happens in the comics or in the TV shows of the past, the cartoons or live action, and then in this one too, it's always interesting to see how they have their sense of drama surrounding it. And of course, having Natasha pinned is the perfect way to just heighten that tension. Not that she could do anything about it if she weren't pinned, but it's just the fact that she is pinned makes it even more dramatic.
Well, what's interesting is I guess I'm really curious, because he clearly is fighting it. He's dealing with whatever he has to do. I'm assuming, I mean, we know he's always angry. So theoretically, he has some semblance of control. He can kind of determine, I'm angry enough and now I want to let it out. They've been blown through a window from an explosion. So obviously there is pain and there's a lot of issues that they're going through that likely makes it harder to control that rage. But what's interesting is like he seems to be really actually fighting it. And then she's piping up and talking. Is it the things that she's saying, do you think, that kind of pushes him over the edge? Because we got this thing where she says, I swear on my life, I'll get you out of this. You walk away and never, ever. And he growls at her and he says, your life. And that seems to be kind of the breaking point. I mean, how do you two read this? Does that make sense?
I find this a bit of a strange exchange. I'm not entirely sure what to think about it, because what is Hulk referring to? Is he referring to her life versus his life, which is, in his perspective, sort of cursed with this other guy? Because his life is indestructible, right? Like, he's not going anywhere. She's the one at risk, right? And I'm not entirely sure how this was intended, how it was written. I don't know. I don't know. Kurtis?
Well, I have to admit that I didn't watch the previous conversation. Like, I didn't rewatch this whole movie leading up to this podcast, so I am a little bit fuzzy on past conversations that they may have had earlier in this movie. But I got the sense that this was referencing something earlier, and maybe you can correct me if I'm missing something there.
Well, there definitely was before that explosion happened, when Clint and his team arrived and he shoots his arrow that blows up Engine 3, we had that, perhaps largely because the Mind Stone and the Scepter was influencing all of them. But there was that large fight between everybody, and there was a lot of it, the points specifically between Bruce and Natasha focused on the fact that, she was trying to get him out of there. Hey, do you think it's a good idea to maybe leave this place so you're not triggered? And he's getting upset at her because she's always babying him. And he's like, I was perfectly fine in Calcutta with my life before you came and interrupted everything.
Yeah.
So...
And that's what I got from that. Is like,
yeah.
I swear on my life, and Bruce is like, your life. This is my. I'm only here in this situation because you got me here.
Yeah.
What I love about this conversation here is that Natasha is trying to convince Hulk to remain calm by pumping him up, by saying, you can do this, you can fight it, give it everything you got, which is a direct reversal from what we see in Avengers 2, when the way she knows now how to calm him down by saying, the sun's going down, or whatever it is that she's always saying, getting real low.
And sounds good, right?
Well, which is exactly what we've learned from past iterations of Hulk, right? Whether it's Norton or Bana, their way to calm themselves is through like peaceful meditation, not from somebody encouraging them strongly to be calm, right? Aggressive calm, toxic calm. There's one other thing I just want to shout out on this, is that this is the first time we see Ruffalo's body capture in the character of Hulk, right? Like, we've seen him sort of emote rage earlier in the film, but this is the first time we get to see him do a transformation, right? As an actor. And I think I really love it. Like, I love the way he uses his body as Hulk and the way he is captured as Hulk. And I think he is one of those actors, like Andy Serkis, that has really been able to adapt to motion capture performance. And, I'm reading a lot of interviews with him and watching him act in the behind the scenes footage is always a real delight, because he does know how to act in a bubble and make it believable, so that when it's transferred to bits and giant green rage monster on screen, it still feels like Mark Ruffalo doing that performance. And I think that's a pretty special thing to be able to do.
I will say, though, that I find this CG in this scene, that they don't quite nail the weight of the character as he's throwing himself around the room. There are some parts where it just feels like it's a little bit more ragdoll than it should be. And that's just kind of the nature of trying to animate a human character. It's hard. and the later movies definitely get better at this point of CG history. During this movie is pretty good, but there's still those few moments where it's a little bit off.
Still some growing to do.
Yeah, I think to that point, like it's almost not. I don't know. Might have less of a problem with the way his body, like his CG of the body reacts, but the rest of the environment, I don't believe the interactions between his body and the rest of the environment around him.
That's what it is.
That's stuff that crumples.
And that's what I mean by his weight. He's supposed to be, especially as Hulk or turning into Hulk, very, very heavy. But the way he moves, he's bouncing around kind of very light.
Yeah. Although one moment that I always, I don't know, I think that I like the way that it plays. I mean, there's an element of it where it does look a little artificial, but I love the way as he's slowly starting to like first transform, and his body, like he's just like in kind of a throw of he's like moving, he's just shuffling, and he actually like shuffles himself right off the ledge. There's something about that I mean, when he lands, he definitely doesn't look like he's actually part of the space there. He definitely looks CG, but just the way that it plays, like the choreography of the movement, I actually like quite a bit. I also think it's really funny. He lands on there's typing, or there's like painted markings on the floor that says "warning: contents under pressure," and I
love that.
Funny.
Yep. It's a blink and you miss it joke. Like you can't even see it if you're watching it just straight through. You have to pause to see that joke. It's so funny. I love it.
You're welcome, movie by minute universe.
See, sometimes it wins.
There is a connection I have, speaking of about his sort of physicality, that I spent some time on a bison ranch for a photography project some years back, and one of the interesting things about bison, they're giant, they're all muscle, and when they're moving, they have the energy of a puppy. And there is a thing about seeing a 1,500-pound animal bouncing across the plains that feels like that. I'm standing there looking at it, and it feels CG. It feels like it should not exist in the way that it exists. And that's kind of the vibe I get from, and I have to rewire my brain a little bit. Like, this feels like it should not exist. But if I think about it as a giant buffalo in the middle of this helicarrier, somehow it starts to make sense again. Like, he's a little bit lighter on his feet than you would ever expect him to be. To the credit of the animators, maybe they were looking at buffalo when they made the Hulk. That doesn't necessarily make it more believable if you don't have that reference point. But
right.
it is kind of an experience I can conjure a comp.
It is worth pointing out, just as you mentioned, Pete, that this is really the first time where they had the actor doing so much of the actual motion capture work and being a part of it to kind of create the version of Hulk. It's not just like a straight up CG creation like we got in Ang Lee's or what they were doing in The Incredible Hulk. Like this, there really was a lot more of that actual work, and Mark Ruffalo wanted to really be a part of that. So that was a valuable addition to kind of creating this Hulk, and they may not always make it fitting into its environment as effectively as we'd want it to, but I do think that there is a level of Ruffalo being involved that makes me buy this character. Like I like the way that Hulk plays here.
Oh, totally.
And I mean, you also get these moments, like, I mean, you kind of joked about it at the end of our last minute, but, we've got that moment as she's calling to him, and you get this close up of his face as he turns and looks at her. And it's like he's half transformed, but definitely green. And you still have those Bruce Banner eyes kind of in the Hulk body, the Hulk face of this close up. And it's like that last look of Bruce before he fully becomes Hulk. And I find that that's such a kind of a touching moment, as if he doesn't say anything, but it's almost like he is acknowledging, I'm sorry for what's about to happen because I'm not going to be here anymore. I don't know. I love that shot.
Well, and that's, I think, such a performative gem, right? That is the capture of the artist maintaining the sort of humanizing features of Ruffalo inside this almost totally green transformed Hulk, that we can still see that in mostly bits on the screen is pretty special.
And we don't get quite the full transformation, but he certainly is going through the process here. His shirt rips off. There's the iconic, although it's the purple shirt, not purple shorts, but still, he rips the purple shirt off fantastically. The pants, of course, still fit because they're stretchy. Apparently, I'm sure we learned that in the last film. I'm sure that this Hulk is still wearing stretchy enough pants.
So one thing that they really focus on in the previous minute and at the beginning of this minute, when Hulk is down on the ground, he's wearing a watch on his left arm. And I'm like, that watch is going to pop off. But we never see it pop off.
Yeah, true. We have him fiddling with it even. Like it's been called out a number of times because there's the conversation with Steve, him, and Tony in the Wishbone lab, and I can't remember if he takes it off, but he's playing with the strap. So it's weirdly something that's been brought up. But yeah, when he, at about 30 seconds, when he leans back in pain, the watch is gone. It is no longer on his wrist.
The watch is already gone. Like, oh man, missed opportunity there.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been really cool because I think at this early stage, Disney kind of went out of their way, or Marvel went out of their way to not connect the previous Hulk movie with this new Mark Ruffalo Hulk. But it would have been cool if that watch was actually the heart rate monitor that Ed Norton wore through the other movie.
That would have been nice. That would have been very nice.
That would have been fantastic.
It's interesting. They've done their work to connect that movie with so many other facets, whether it's William Hurt coming in, or now, as we've learned, we're going to be getting Liv Tyler coming back. And
it turns out Liv Tyler was the heart rate monitor all along.
But yeah, it's interesting that like there are so many other elements that Blonsky absolutely is another one, but they're not. When it comes to Hulk himself, they're like, let's try to make people forget that there was a change in actors there. The rest of it's fine, but we don't need them to remember that.
They made one reference to that in the She-Hulk TV series when, because Hulk says like, you can't blame me for that. I was a completely different person then.
Right. Which is, of all of them, the perfect property to have made that meta reference in.
Definitely.
So good. So good.
So you mentioned kind of your joy with all the Hulk transformations in the various iterations. They very specifically wanted this Hulk to always be the same size. I know that was something that has changed in the Hulk comics, and certainly like in the Ang Lee Hulk, the angrier he gets, the bigger he gets. I think he was just a bigger Hulk in the Incredible Hulk. I don't think he was necessarily changing size. But bigger than this Hulk, like taller. What's your preference with Hulk? Do you like him changing sizes? Do you like the size of this Hulk? Like, how does that play for you? Because it's definitely something that they've done a lot in varying ways over the course of the character.
I think if they're going to lean into the horror aspect of the character, this needs to be a bigger, like larger than life character. I like it when the Hulk is towering above everybody. He doesn't need to be like a Godzilla or a King Kong type of a character, but definitely taller than all of the Avengers. When he first appeared in the comics, way back in 1962, he was just like normal person size, but a Hulk, like a monster type of a look. And like that's it. When you couple that with the rage, sure, that's kind of scary, but it's much scarier if this Hulk is like towering over everybody else.
Yeah, there's a bit of that I feel like I can let go of the weird physics of Hulk because there's so much of that Jekyll and Hyde like horror energy to it, and it makes the just sort of towering giantess of Hulk that much more threatening. I love it, and lest I say it one more time, it is why Professor Hulk in our current state is so frustrating.
Yeah.
There are elements that I like in those other ones. Like there's something I really like in Ang Lee's Hulk, where when he's the huge Hulk and he's on the streets of San Francisco and Betty calms him down and we see him shrink down back to Bruce, the amount of like sweat and water that kind of pours out, I find that to be something that I don't know. It's a really compelling moment in that film that I actually like in kind of that exploration of how they did the Hulk there. But the size changing always, it was never one of my favorite things. I felt like it was just a little weird. The fact that the angrier he gets, the bigger he gets. But I do like that he's bigger. And I think that this Hulk ends up being a pretty good size. I'm pretty happy with what we get here. And it works well when he's going up against people like Thor, like we'll see, in a few minutes from now when the two of them are fighting and when Thor is trying to hold his, keep Hulk from crushing him. And you can just see the size difference between Hulk's arm and Thor. Like moments like that, I think, do a great job of emphasizing the difference.
Yeah, it's one of those sacrifices we have to make because of, the size difference in the comics. Like that's one where it feels like they're allegiant to the comic, like hero panels of the Hulk in a way that's super satisfying. And still, because of Mark Ruffalo, it's grounded to me.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about the medical team that comes running up to them at one point and Black Widow kind of shoos them away?
That's her read the room move.
We got our two maintenance guys. Hey, they don't know. He's just a professor and one of their spies here. They just want to help out. But yeah, we have the two maintenance people come up. And I did want to talk about our maintenance guy, Josh Cowdery, and play the IMDb game with the two of you for Josh, who is not necessarily a big part here, but is certainly somebody who has been keeping busy out there.
Can hardly see their faces. How do I
That's
know
true.
what this is going to be the hardest IMDb game ever?
I know. It's nigh impossible to get a good look at them because they run up and quickly run out.
Which one is the first one that we're talking about?
Well, we're just talking about one because
in the front.
There's only one who's credited, and he is. And we don't even, when he says his line, they're not even on screen. But I believe he's the one in the back, the blonde-haired one.
Blonde. Okay.
I assumed that line was added in ADR and that the person credited is the voice, but not necessarily those actors on screen. Because those actors on screen could just be extras.
Which is also entirely possible. Yeah, it's hard to say. I would imagine since Josh Cowdery is enough of a credited actor who's done plenty of work, that he would likely, who's also done some voice work, that he would likely hop into IMDb and make note that he was just the voice performer.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
But when I look at him, I can kind of get a sense that, okay, if there's one of the two of these guys, he's the one in the back. But it's also a little difficult to tell completely, but my hunch is he's the guy in the back.
Okay.
Do either of you have any idea as to what Josh Cowdery, without looking at IMDb, what IMDb would say are his known fors? Is he a face that either of you know at all?
Not at all.
This is gonna be an embarrassment. I already feel like you're setting us up.
Not necessarily. But he is in things where he's had bigger parts than this. Not necessarily big parts, but bigger parts. The first one is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, in which he plays Henry Shaw Jr. or Senator Shaw. So he is in that film as somebody
he
of
was
prominence.
Present.
He was president.
I have no idea who he was in Fantastic Beasts. No idea.
He was in Guy Ritchie's film Wrath of Man, which we actually talked about over in the Film Board, another of our shows, in 2021. He plays FBI Agent Hubbard.
Okay.
He is in 2 episodes of a TV show I'm not familiar with at all called Fate, the Winx Saga. Are either of you familiar with that show? A Nickelodeon show?
Oh, it's about fairies. And there's an animated version and a live action version, so I don't know which one this is, though.
He's in the live action version, and it looks like it's a Netflix original series. It's a live action adaptation of Nickelodeon's Winx Club.
There you go. Yeah.
So that's the one that he is in, with 2 episodes as Mike Peters. And last but not least, he was in the TV series Mars for National Geographic. He plays Chris Owens. I'm not sure what that show is about. The first manned mission from Earth to Mars in 2033 attempts to colonize the Red Planet. And so he is just an actor in that show. One of the episodes of at least 12. So not a big part. Anyway, that's Josh Cowdery. He's working actor, trying to get parts and doing stuff like this. So Kudos,
Yeah,
Josh.
that's certainly some non-trivial credits. Maybe, in the spirit of no small parts, they might be small parts, but big names.
Certainly.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
But yeah, those are our two maintenance guys. We're going to see more maintenance people in the coming minutes. Yeah. Any last thoughts about this minute from either of you?
I've got no other comments other than it's a great transformation. It's a really good minute, and I wish that I was talking about the next minute as well, because continuing on the fully realizing that the transformation is pretty cool.
Well, okay, so you said you love these transformations. Do you have a ranking of okay, let's say what is the first transformation we see in the Incredible Hulk? Is it it's in the Brazilian bottling plant, right? But I don't know if we see the transformation. I just think he is just Hulk in the shadows there, right?
That one is really cool. Yeah, because he's in the shadows and it's just an unknown force that you can't see. Before they really want to give you the big reveal of the look of the character.
Yeah, right.
This one is right up there because also it's in the shadows, and especially in the next minute when we'll see, I don't want to spoil for whoever's hosting that one, but there's just some great reveals in that one.
Lots of good moments with his transformation. Well, this is a good place to stop. We are going to be back with you in a few weeks to talk about minutes 88 and 89. So we certainly look forward to that. But thanks for joining us for yesterday and today. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm always happy to be a part of this. It's a lot of fun.
Tell everybody again about your podcast and where they can track it down.
Sure, yeah. Head over to epicmarvelpodcast.com and you can hear a bunch of episodes of me talking about old Marvel comics. We've also got a bunch of interviews with comic creators up there as well. You can find me also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and even Substack if you just search for my name or if you look for Epic Marvel Podcast. And if you love Marvel's Epic Collections, then search for Epic Collections on Facebook and you'll find my Facebook group where we just talk about those Epic Collections all day, every day.
That is amazing.
That's awesome.
You are everywhere doing that, and that is just fantastic. There's so much content. So
yeah, there is.
Well, we appreciate it. We'll be back, as I said, in a few weeks. So that's it for today. We'll be back next week with another guest for Minute 76. Until then, Pete, thanks as always.
Tomorrow, it's a helicarrier parkour party.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.